Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first of our series of Northstar Digital Literacy trainings offered by Teresa Slodek from Northstar from Literacy, Minnesota. My name is Andrea Lewandowski. I'm with the New Jersey State Library, and you might recognize my name if you've been receiving emails from the State Library regarding your Northstar license. If you haven't heard from me or you're not receiving those emails and you want to hear from me, I'm going to put my email address in the chat so that you can get in touch with me. This session is being recorded. It will be on YouTube, hopefully by the end of the day, and I will be sending the recording link out to everyone who registered. So stay tuned for that. Check out your email address for that. If there's anyone else I should send it to you too, you can put their email address in the chat. One last thing is the New Jersey State Library has a Northstar user group for New Jersey libraries that have licenses. That meets, I believe, on the third Thursday of every month, and I'm going to put information about that into the chat. So these sessions are to learn the ins and outs of Northstar from the expert, like the person that I go to when you guys have tricky questions. But we will also have this user group for talking about how to use it, things that are working in your libraries, things that come up, ideas that you'd like to share. So I want you to feel supported with Northstar from the State Library, and also with Northstar with Literacy Minnesota themselves as well. All right, so enough for me. Teresa, thank you so much for being here today and for the next 2 days. So looking forward to this.
Well, thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well on this Tuesday morning. And today we're going to talk about, so we do have a 3-part training, and today is really kind of an overview to give you an idea of what Northstar has available to you. There is a lot of information and a lot of me talking, so I apologize for that. The message I mostly want to get across is that there is a lot in Northstar, and you do have access to all of it. And sometimes that can be overwhelming to libraries as they're just starting out on their digital literacy journey. So what I want you to come away with is these things are possible, but you don't have to do everything all at once. My advice to all of you is to pick a place that makes sense for your library to start. So think about what staffing you have, what kind of workflow you have, what your goals are for digital literacy. And instead of thinking, oh, we have to have everything in place before we, do everything in Northstar, just pick one thing and start there. And that's going to make your life a little easier. I welcome your questions as we go along. You can either unmute and ask, or you can put it in the chat. Don't worry about interrupting me. Like I was saying to Andrea, I do this all the time, so I'd much rather answer your questions than say what I am planning to say. So we'll talk a little bit about Literacy Minnesota, which is the organization that I work for and that owns Northstar. We'll talk a little bit about how Northstar got started and why we do the things we do. And then we'll spend most of the time, though, looking at what Northstar has in it. So we'll look at the assessments that are there, why you'd use them. We'll look at the 2 educational resources that we have, which are instructor-led curricula, which would be more for either one-on-one tutoring or classes. And then the self-directed online learning, which patrons could do on their own mostly. We'll look at the and then the learner management system that's kind of ties that all together, and reports that you have, some of the reports you have access to. So Literacy Minnesota, we're a nonprofit. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary. We focus on adult education. So English language learning, citizenship, reading, writing, math, and of course, digital literacy. We also, we have 4 of our own learning centers here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul that do work with adults. We also do statewide training to volunteers and teachers who are working with adults on literacy. And because of that, if any of your libraries do now or want to provide anything around English language learning or literacy to adults, We do have just a ton of free resources that are accessed by people from around the world. I'd say 95% of them are free. And you can find them at this link. So if you looked at Literacy Minnesota educator resources, there's just a lot there that can be helpful for you if you are interested in providing literacy at your library. We also, of course, do digital literacy. And we also advocate for reducing poverty through literacy. And in those efforts, we collaborate nationwide with many different individuals and organizations, including libraries and healthcare systems, low-income housing, adult education, because we feel that we all, serve oftentimes similar populations, and literacy is a thread in all of that. So let's talk about digital literacy. So when you think about digital literacy, when you think, let's say that I'm a person who does not know how to use a computer or doesn't know how to search on the internet, what are some of the things I cannot do? If I've never really used a computer, I don't know how to search on the internet, don't know how to use email. You can either put it in the chat or just unmute. What can't I do?
Hard to use Northstar if you can't log on to the internet.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of online training, right, that libraries offer, online resources that I couldn't access. I can't renew my driver's license. I can't apply for unemployment. So a lot of government services are accessed online now. Filling out forms, online banking. What else can't I do? I can't do word processing, write a resume on Word or similar system. Hard to connect with others, even sometimes with, I might not be able to use email to, let's say I have a child in school, most of the communications from the school come via email or through a parent portal. Same in healthcare. I couldn't do telehealth. I wouldn't be able to access my healthcare portal. I would have a hard time applying for jobs because most of the applications are online. Go back to school. Yeah, a lot of adult education opportunities can be online or have components of like a community colleges. Maybe I would have to use a distance learning platform. I might not know how to use that. Great. And then, of course, there are many jobs. I just read a report that came out yesterday that said, do everything pretty much. You're right, Alice. That said 93% of jobs now have a digital component. That's a lot, 93% of jobs. So these are all the reasons why we hope to help people gain skills around digital literacy, and why digital literacy knowledge can really impact people very powerfully in their lives. So Northstar, we have been, as you may know or may not know, we are geared toward people who are at that really beginner level or even no knowledge of digital literacy, up to kind of maybe some intermediate. So we wouldn't, if someone is looking to get into IT, for example, we wouldn't be that high level. We're really for beginning level digital literacy. At Northstar, we've been around for 10 years, maybe 11 now. We are used across the country and in all 50 states, several different countries, used by over 1,000 libraries in the United States. It was initially written in English, and then we have had a lot of feedback saying, hey, this would be useful if it was in Spanish. So we were able to secure the funding, and now are translating the assessments and the practice lessons into Spanish. And a third of those are done. The team expects all of it will be done by the end of April this year. And then they're also now starting to work on the instructor-led curriculum, putting that into Spanish as well. And they're starting with the basic computer, the very first kind of module. Northstar is fully compatible with desktops, laptops, and Chromebooks. However, I know many of the patrons that you work with, they might only have a phone or they might only have a tablet. You can use Northstar on a tablet. There's a few drag and drop questions that you can't do on that device. And so I would usually instruct people just to skip those. And then but on a phone, I would say it's not great, to be honest. You can use it, but just the user interface is very difficult you have to do a lot of scrolling. So we are working with a user interface, consultant to make it user friendly on both tablets and phones from the way it looks as well as the way it works. And so that is something that will be rolling out over the course of the next year, making it more compatible with those devices, because we know that's important to people. So Northstar got its start from our local library here in St. Paul, and they were looking for a way to assess patrons who are taking computer classes. And so they came to us and they said, can you create some, assessments that would help us place people in the various classes so we can instruct them appropriately. And we have experts on staff. We're connected with that nationwide group that has many experts. We pulled those people together and they started looking at, what are the components of basic digital literacy, things like internet searching or using email. And once they identified those topics, then for each one, they started creating standards. And this is important because this is what Northstar is built on, basically. So the standards are skills that someone needs to be competent in this area. So for using email, one of the standards is how to attach a Word document into an email. They're very specific skills that are very measurable if you can do them or not. Once the standards were created, then the assessments were made based on those standards. So the standards say these are the skills you need. The assessments then say, test whether or not you have those skills. Because we work with people who are lower level English language learners, we wanted to make this as accessible as we could to that group of people. And we felt we could write this at a grade 4 English reading level, which would be about an intermediate English language learner level, and still maintain the digital literacy integrity of the lessons, as well as have it at a lower English reading level. We also decided to make it web-based. So as long as you have a device and an internet connection, you can access Northstar from anywhere in the world. We initially made it just for St. Paul libraries, and we were really surprised at how quickly it gained national attention. And that's because there was at the time and still isn't anything out there at this lower English reading level and lower digital literacy level. So you all now have access through the state library to a subscription. We went to initially Northstar was free, and there's still a free version, but we went to the subscription model when we saw the need. We wanted to maintain Northstar. And as you know, the digital literacy landscape is constantly changing. So in order to keep Northstar updated, we needed to dedicate staff to doing that task. So the subscription model would pay for that maintenance. And then if we want to do anything in addition, like the translation, we seek outside funding and through grants or through private organizations. So Northstar started with these assessments, and Northstar is great because it's very flexible and a lot of different types of organizations use it. So libraries, adult education, businesses, community colleges, four-year colleges, workforce, healthcare systems all use Northstar, and they all serve slightly different populations and have different needs. And it came to our attention after people were using the assessments that many of the organizations didn't have the resources to actually create training material. So they had the assessments to determine what someone knew and what they needed to learn, but they didn't have, the staffing or the knowledge to create the training material to teach what they needed to learn. So Northstar responded by creating instructor-led curriculum, which would be what you would expect in a normal digital literacy class, a computer lab class. And you can also use it with one-on-one tutoring. So if you have digital navigators or if you have staff that do tutoring or even volunteers, that would be the kind of curriculum you could use. Working with many libraries, we know that oftentimes libraries don't have staffing to provide classes. And so we started creating the self-directed online learning practice lessons. And this helps, it might need some onboarding from someone on staff of the library, but it does help learners kind of do this more on their own. And along with that, as I mentioned before, we now have a learner management system and reporting. So you can see, and the learner can see their progress and what they've done. So we currently have 15 different assessments. And the important thing to know is that no one person has to take all 15. It really depends on what their goals are and maybe what your goals as a program are. So if someone really wants to just work on their Excel skills in order to get a particular job, they could just focus on that. Having said that, if you are working with patrons who come in with maybe low computer skills or no computer skills, the 3 assessments that most organizations will focus on are the first 3 listed under essential computer skills. So basic computer, internet basics, and using email. These, of course, are the ones that people are going to need the most help on. And really, if someone can't pass these assessments, it's difficult to do anything in the other assessments. You can see that these assessments are kind of broken out into 3 areas. So the first area, the essential computer skills, these are really the building blocks of digital literacy. And, people would either probably do Windows 10 or Mac OS, depending on what devices they use. The essential software, this is a little Microsoft heavy because that's what was being used at the time Northstar was developed. And then Google has, come along and taken a much bigger share of the market. So we did add on Google Docs, and we hope to add Google Drive, Google Sheets, and Google Slides as we get the funding. The using technology in daily life, these are either a little more difficult or a little more specialized. Most of them, you probably know what they are, like social media, information literacy. As librarians, you know what that is. Career search skills is fairly obvious. The accessing telehealth appointments, as I mentioned, healthcare organizations do use Northstar. But in talking to a variety of different types of healthcare organizations over the last 2 years, I have found that telehealth is something that's growing and it's not going to go away. And those organizations are seeing that many patients don't have the skills to participate in telehealth appointments. So it's great a telehealth appointment is great if you don't have transportation, if you don't have childcare, if you live far from your doctor. But if you don't have the digital skills to fully participate, then you're kind of left further across the healthcare divide. And what many libraries across the country are doing is, and you probably have heard of this, sometimes they'll dedicate a room or have a little telephone booth where they'll allow patrons to access, set up telehealth appointments. So maybe someone doesn't have an internet connection, or maybe they don't have a device, and they might not know how to do it. So if you are thinking about doing that, this is a great opportunity to make sure that someone has the skills necessary to do a telehealth appointment. And this is also something that patrons can just take on their own, even if you don't have the telephone booth set up. Your digital footprint is the idea that whatever you do online, you leave traces behind. You want to be aware of that and make sure that what you are making public is what you want to make public. And then supporting K-12 distance learning, this was created during the pandemic for parents who are helping their children. What we found, though, is that, as someone mentioned in the chat, many adult education programs, community colleges, higher level training programs do use distance learning platforms. And I'm hearing from community colleges especially all the time that students are coming into the college and don't know how to use the distance learning platform and are falling behind because of it. And so oftentimes they are now offering these classes at the community colleges. But if you have patrons who are thinking of, taking those kinds of classes, this would be something that would help them be prepared for that educational experience. So you can see that 5 of these are now in Spanish. And as I mentioned, the other 10 will be available, should be by the end of April. The team is currently working on Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And I believe those should all be out sometime this month, available in Spanish. So when a person takes an assessment, then they will go onto your library will have its own site-specific URL, and that's how they'll access the assessment. And we'll talk about this more in further trainings. And the assessments, for the most part, except for some of the very first ones, the basic computer internet basics, are scenario-based. So they're kind of real-world scenarios. And then instead of like choosing true, false, or multiple choice, you actually have to perform the skill to show that you know how to do it. So here's an example of one question from the telehealth assessment, where you can see that in this question, you have to check the box where it's asking for, saying that you need an interpreter. And then here's another example from that same assessment where the test taker is being asked to basically troubleshoot. So at this point, I want to give you all an opportunity, if you haven't, to take one of the Northstar assessments. And this is important because it will let you see what they're actually like. For most of you, depending on the assessment you choose, it will only take 5-10 minutes to do. And it will let you see, like I said, what it looks like. But also, I have yet to find anyone who has passed all 15 assessments on the first try with 100% on each one. So that's my challenge to you. Now, if you pick one of depending on what you pick, you probably will pass it, but with 100%. So I want to show you how you can take this. This is going to be through the free website, so none of your scores are going to be recorded. But the assessments themselves are the same on the free website. And so I'm going to go there now, and then I'll put it in the chat too. Hopefully I'm going to go there. All right, so this is our homepage. digitalliteracyassessment.org is the website, and I'll put that in the chat. So go ahead and go there. And then what you're going to do is you'll see here on the left-hand side, it says take an assessment in this green oval. You'll click on that, scroll down a bit, and then all 15 assessments are here. You can choose whatever assessment you want to take. Some of them are a little longer. I think information literacy and career search skills are the 2 longest ones. And I'll give you maybe 7 minutes. And don't worry if you don't finish. I just want you to more get a sense. So what will happen is once you click on one of those, you'll hear some cello music. So make sure you're muted. Just to test your audio, there'll be an orientation video that you can watch or you can skip. And then you'll start the assessment. If you'd like to try it in Spanish, right above on my screen where it says using technology in daily life, you can see it says language, and right now it's set to English. If you click on that drop down arrow and click on Latin American Spanish, then the whole site is in Spanish. And again, you click on the green oval and it will lead you to the 5 that are in Spanish. So take it in whatever language you prefer. And we'll come back in about 7 minutes. And finished, no. So any thoughts or comments initially that you had? All right. So I do see something in the chat. Okay, so Natalie did the internet basics and like the interactivity. It is kind of a fun thing to do. And in fact, I've heard from libraries that kids really enjoy doing this. It's kind of gamified in a way, because if you finished, you'll see that you got your results score, and oftentimes then people will be like, okay, well, I got, whatever the score I got, I want to get 100. So they'll keep kind of trying through using the practice lessons to try and learn the skills. And Patricia makes a very good point, which we will talk about a lot, but it is a great way to do a pre-assessment before the learning. So oftentimes, kind of what I would do is I would have someone go through the assessment first and then see what they already know and where the areas of focus in terms of instruction or learning could be. And so then they're not wasting their time and energy going over material they already know, but really focusing on those skills that they might want to learn. Mouse accuracy can be a very hard skill for some people to learn, and it is a skill that needs practice. I agree with that. All right, so if you finished, you saw that when you finish, you get a results page. And Northstar says that in order to pass, you have to have 85% or higher. And if you look at the left-hand side of this, you can see in the green column, these are the skills or standards that this person has passed. And then in the gray column, these are the skills or standards that the person has not yet passed. And so if you look here, you can see that standard 5, this is an internet basics test. This is standard 5 on privacy settings. They didn't pass. But if they wanted to go right from this assessment, let's say this was a pre-assessment, they could go to the right of it where the little barbell says practice, and that would take them to that part of the practice lesson. So they passed the assessment. They don't need to do the entire module. They can really just focus on those areas that they have yet to learn. So again, it saves them, time and energy, and is really, really focused on each individual's learning needs. And Andrea makes a good point. On the public version, you don't see the practice. That would only be through your libraries, through the subscription model, that you would see that practice. So when someone takes an assessment, you can either provide it to them unproctored or proctored. And proctored just means that there's someone on staff or volunteer who is watching the person take the assessment, who verifies that they are who they say they are, and make sure they're not using notes or having someone help them. Oftentimes you'll have the pre-assessment. If you're using it as a pre-assessment, not proctored, then the relevant instruction will happen. And then once the person takes the assessment again, it will be proctored in hopes that they can pass. And if someone took an assessment and it was unproctored and they passed, Northstar, you could still get a digital badge, and that would be like a micro credential that would say it's unproctored. And so sometimes, this is something that could be used on a resume or LinkedIn or something like that if people are using digital badges. Not everyone does. If it was proctored and they passed, they would also get a digital badge, and they could get a certificate that you either print out and give to them or email them as a PDF, assuming that this person has, the skills to open an email and a PDF. which many may not. So we initially made the certificates to show potential employers what someone knew. And I hear from organizations across the country that many people who go through Northstar and can talk about the assessments they've passed, who maybe list them on their resume or on LinkedIn, this can be helpful to them getting a job, especially for those people who have been out of the workforce for a while. So either through incarceration or because they've been staying at home with family. People who this might be their first job in this country or their first job ever. And for people who are moving more from a labor type job to a desk type job, whose resume, their work experience may not show they have these skills, but this can be a way to show objectively that they do know what they're doing with these digital skills. What we found to be even more important than that, though, was how much confidence getting the certificates gives people. So oftentimes people who have lower digital literacy skills or no digital literacy skills are very afraid of the computers. And it sounds like you all work with, or many of you work with people in a classroom situation. They're afraid of breaking the computer. They're afraid of messing things up. And they're afraid of their own ability to learn the skills. And so having, again, this objective piece of paper that says they know what they're doing can be very powerful. And I've had people who will start crying when they get them. They'll give me high fives. They will buy frames and hang them up in their apartments. One woman she passed internet basics and she put it on her fridge to show her teenagers she knew what she was doing. So it's just all these really great stories. And they also help, I have heard, they help with persistence in other longer term goals. So if someone is taking, classes or learning English or trying to get their high school equivalency degree, those are all really long-term educational pursuits, or even looking for a job can be longer term. And Northstar is a much quicker win. So it helps people once they pass Northstar to see that if they put the time and energy into learning the material, they actually see a difference. And even if let's say someone takes the assessment as a pre-assessment and gets, 22%. And then they spend some time learning Northstar through classes or through the practice lessons. They take the assessment again and they get 65%. Well, they haven't passed, but they've tripled their knowledge. And so people can see that progression. Adults tend to be very hard on themselves anyway, in terms of what they're learning and what they know. And so again, having this objective way for them to track what they're learning is really helpful. And I recently had, a couple months ago, I guess, a woman in California, she was gifted a laptop. She didn't know how to turn it on. She went to her local library in California. All public libraries in California happen to have Northstar, and there was someone there who was willing to help her. So they sat down with her. She took the Northstar assessment for basic computer, and because of using a phone, she knew some things. I think it was in the 20%. And she then worked with this digital navigator on learning basic computer skills. And then after a few weeks, took the assessment again and didn't pass, but did get, I think it was somewhere in the 60s. She was so excited that she wanted the librarian to write to Northstar, to me, and to tell me what she had done. And she also sent a picture of herself along with studying at the computer with her Northstar material, by her desk. And it was very heartwarming for me to get, but it was so cool that she was that excited about the progress that she had made. So here's a picture of one of the students that was at our school, and he's holding several of the certificates in his hand. You can give someone a certificate for, everything they've passed. What we found is that people like to have a separate certificate for each assessment they have passed. Again, it's just that pride, that feeling of pride and accomplishment. So this is a learner that we typically see, in that he had been an auto mechanic for his whole career, got to a point where he just physically couldn't do the job anymore, but wanted to stay in the field, working at an auto supply store. And he didn't have the digital skills necessary to do that. I think his digital skills were pretty low. So he came to our school, ended up passing all the Northstar assessments and getting his dream job at Napa Auto Parts. So it was really great for us to be part of this journey and to see him succeed in his dream. We mentioned this, but a lot of times organizations will use the assessments, will give an assessment as a pre-assessment just to see what someone already knows and then where the focus of the learning might take place. Provide that instruction either through classes, through Digital Navigator, one-on-one tutoring, or through the practice lessons, or a combination of those. And then give the assessment again, oftentimes proctored this time, in hopes that someone will pass to get that certificate. Libraries also, I have talked to many libraries who will have the first step in their Northstar rollout be to prepare their own staff. And I do encounter many instructors and staff who don't feel comfortable. Maybe they've never taught digital literacy and they don't really feel comfortable teaching it, or maybe they're unsure of their own digital skills. And if you are feeling uncomfortable about teaching it, that discomfort will come across to the learner. And if they're already anxious about learning these skills, they're gonna be more anxious. So having your staff go through the assessments and then the learning material can be really beneficial. One, just so they get familiar with it, but two, to make them feel more confident in working with learners on this. Yes, thank you for putting that, Andrea. It was 92%. That was the report I was talking about. It's a great report in the chat. The other thing is Northstar is really great for professional development. So most of us taught ourselves digital skills. And because of that, we have gaps. Maybe things we never had to do, or maybe we don't know the most efficient way of doing things. And so this can be a great way just for professional development. I personally have used Northstar and learned things from Northstar that have made my job more efficient. So I would encourage you all, just from that perspective alone, to use Northstar. If you decide you want to do proctoring as a library, you can do that either in person or remotely, and both are quite easy to do. And we'll talk a lot more about that in future trainings tomorrow and the day after. Any questions that you have about the assessments right now before we talk about the educational materials? Okay. Oh, I do see something in the chat. Oh, this is a good question. Cindy asked, how long does an assessment typically take people if they're lower digital literacy level? And I would say on average, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for someone with lower digital literacy skills to take one of the assessments. Again, the information literacy and career search are longer assessments, so that might take them a little bit longer. I think the longest I've seen it take someone who was low English language skills and low digital literacy skills. I think the longest I saw was 35 minutes, but on average, it is about that 15 to 20 minute range. Good question. So we do have instructor-led curricula for all 15 of the unit topics. And the curriculum is, like everything, aligned with those Northstar standards. So you can see when someone takes, let's say, that assessment, what standards they have to work on. Then an instructor can pinpoint their teaching to those standards that someone may need. Or you can do this in a classroom situation too, where the whole class takes the assessment as a pre-assessment, and you as an instructor can see, okay, they're pretty solid on these standards, but this is where the class mostly needs to focus. The curriculum is meant to be very easy to use. You don't have to have a degree in a master's in education to use it. And in fact, many of our our schools do use volunteers who have no education background. And so I would say when I first taught it, it was in person. It took me maybe 15, 20 minutes to prep for each lesson. And that was mostly making handouts. So as you'll see in a second, it's very easy to follow. You don't have to prepare a lot in advance. It's also very learner-centered. It was written for adults with hopefully topics that adults find interesting. And very interactive, just like the assessment someone commented on. It's interactive and there's a lot of repetition. So our philosophy at Northstar is that you can't really learn digital literacy through lecture alone. You really need to get in there and practice the skills. And again, when I first taught this, I thought, oh boy, people are going to get kind of bored with so much repetition. But they loved it. It helped people feel competent in the skill to repeat it over several times. And if you are teaching this in a classroom situation and you find the class has mastered the skill, you can always move on quicker if you'd like. The other great thing about the lessons is that they are independent of one another. So if you decide you don't want to do the whole using email module, but you really want to just pull out the piece on phishing scams, you can easily do that. Or if you want to combine different pieces of different unit topics, you can do that too. Here's a question for all of you from Patricia. If any of you have used their YA teens to tutor and help adult learners. You all know the answer to that. I don't, but I have heard from other organizations that it's a great intergenerational way to have people working together, to have teens. In fact, Best Buy has teen tech centers. I don't know if you've heard of this, where they're helping teens gain technical skills. But some of them are starting to pilot a program where they're working with the teens, then people in their communities who to teach them Northstar, go through Northstar and use it with their elders, because the teens are from the community themselves, so they're more trusted because they come from that community, and it's a great kind of partnership. So great idea.
So this is a good plug for our user group meetings as well, because that will be the kinds of questions that I hope that we can address and capture some best practices that are happening. I know that Plainsboro Public Library used teens for a class that they were teaching to seniors. What they found was, given the times that the seniors would come to classes at the library, it worked best during summer, because when the teens were available in the nights and weekends during the school year, that wasn't necessarily the times when the seniors were coming to the library. So Plainsboro, I feel like I heard someone else, but now it's slipping my mind. So but that is a great question, and I hope we can explore that more in the user group meetings in the future too.
Yeah, I am not in those user group meetings, but I know that we nationally have, and Andrea is involved in this, a state librarian user group meeting, which I hope to get to usually. And I learned a lot of great stuff of what the libraries are doing just myself. And so hopefully other libraries can learn. You all know what your situation is like the best. But that's a great idea. All right, so on average, there are about 8 lesson plans per unit topic. So unit topic would be like internet basics. And the curriculum writers felt that it would take about 2 hours to complete each lesson. So if you did an entire unit topic, it would be about 15, 16 hours. That might be fine for the what you have available to you in terms of time and staff. However, many organizations don't have that much time. So they again will give the pre-assessment, determine where to really focus, and maybe even meld like basic computer and internet basics and email into kind of a 2-week intensive class. So it really depends more so on what your goals are as a library and the goals of the people you're working with, and staffing and room size you have too. Each project also has each topic also has a final unit project, which is more academic in nature. You can use it that way as you're taking a paragraph, you're looking at the topic, the main topics, you're reading for details, which you can do. But if that's something that you're not interested in, that's fine too, because the learner can just read the paragraph, they take the skills they've learned in the unit, and then they create a project with what they've learned and what they've read. So if someone's looking for more or something a little more difficult, or they're maybe quicker to learn than the rest of the class, if you're teaching a class, that's a great option for them. Or if this is just someone working on their own and they want something a little more meaty, that would be a great kind of capstone for that unit. You can use the lessons, you can teach the lessons as a class, you can do them as I said, one-on-one, or like you mentioned with the teen elder pairing, and you can also do it remotely. So many libraries still offer remote components, and I will in our Thursday training, I will actually teach some of the curriculum to you so you can see what it's like to be on the learner end, and we'll talk about what it's like for me to teach. But it is very easy and I actually enjoy it quite a bit. So the people who wrote our curriculum have all taught adult learners, and they've incorporated best practices for adult learning into Northstar. So every lesson includes kind of a warm-up that gets people talking about the topic, kind of breaks the ice, but also lets you as instructors see what they know and where there's gaps in their knowledge, and then lets you tie that to the new material that you're going to be teaching. Then you will go through the objectives. Adults tend to like to know what they're going to learn and how it's relevant to them. Then the instructor will model the skill and explain what they're doing. Then the class does it together. So the instructor can actually make sure that everyone's tracking and following along. If you're finding that some people are getting it and some aren't, you can pair people up and have them do an exercise that gives the person who has mastered the skill an opportunity to teach it so that they can further embed that knowledge, and the person who is still working on it a second chance to practice. Ultimately, everyone has their own task to do and does it individually. And you come back together as a class, go over the objectives. And then there's always digital literacy vocabulary work explicitly taught in the lessons. So here's what the first page of any lesson would look like. And you can see in the upper left-hand corner, here are the standards that are being taught in this lesson. So for every unit topic, Northstar has what we call a scope and sequence, which will list all the standards in that unit topic, and then which lesson you can find each standard in. So again, it helps you pinpoint the lessons you might want to teach pretty easily. In the upper right-hand corner, this is the vocabulary that will be explicitly taught in this lesson. The technology concepts part, this is saying in instructor language what the objectives of the lessons are, and then gives you any teaching tips for things that you might not know. So in this case, it's, different internet browsers call their privacy windows different things. And then the bottom, the teacher prep guide, this is really telling you what you have to do to prepare. You can see that most of it is making copies or planning to show something on the board or on the screen. If you're teaching this remotely, you can click on those blue words there and it will bring up that handout so that you can just show that on the screen rather than the entire lesson that your learners won't be that interested in seeing. I believe that, Andrea, you're recording this. I can't remember if you also wanted the slide deck, but I can definitely send it to you if you want it. Okay. No problem. It is easy to do. So let's see. Oops, kind of forward my slide. So here we are going more in depth into the curriculum. And so here's what I mean by the warm-up. So you can see in this case, it's asking people what kind of information they have to keep safe and how do you keep that safe. And so it gets people talking, gets people interested in the topic. But as an instructor, if you're hearing people talk about keeping information safe, by hiding it or putting it in a box, that lets you know they're at a different spot than if they're talking about how to keep things safe online. So it kind of gives you a perspective of where they might be in their knowledge. Here in the We Will Learn section, these are the objectives. I will say that when I first taught this, I thought, I'll just write these on the board and we'll go over them in like 30 seconds. And I was totally wrong. The class loved this. They wanted to write all this down in their notebooks. And people do, I have found that people love to write things down about digital literacy and refer back to them. So all the handouts and the worksheets, they really like to have them in some kind of binder or folder to refer back to. But I was working with an intermediate English language learner class, and they wanted to write all this down. They wanted to practice saying the words out loud. They wanted to talk about any of the vocabulary they didn't understand. So it became this really nice, very engaged start to the lesson because people were very, very excited about this. And some of the people in the class I was working with said, they had been wanting to learn this material for years and years, but had been too embarrassed to ask someone to teach them. So this was like a perfect opportunity for them to learn. And here's an example of that model and explain piece. So you can see that it gives you as instructors the actual words to say and what to do. And this can be, this is great because it helps maintain consistency across your libraries. Or if someone were to even go to different libraries within New Jersey, they'd all be getting the same kind of information. It also gives you the words to say. So, a lot of us know how to do things, but we might not know the correct terminology. And if I were to say to someone, if I called something a blue navigation bar at one point and a blue ribbon at another, it might be confusing to someone who had lower digital literacy. So I want to try and avoid that and use the correct terminology. The other thing that's great about this is it's probably been a really long time since any of you did not know how to turn on a computer or did not know how to use a mouse or use email. And so when we're talking with people who are at that place, it's sometimes hard to remember what that was like. And we'll use jargon or we'll use words to describe it that don't make sense to someone who doesn't have this knowledge yet. And as I mentioned, a lot of times people are anxious about learning this and their ability to learn this. And so if they are hearing jargon or hearing words that aren't making something that's not making sense to them, it's going to kind of push them further away from wanting to do it. So this helps us meet the learners where they are and really talk to them in a way that we hope will best help them understand the skill without overwhelming them. And then lastly, I want to show you, this is an example of a handout. What I mostly want to show here is you can look at the first names are from a variety of different cultures. And so in all that Northstar does in the videos and the pictures and the names, we do incorporate people from different cultures in the hopes that those who are using Northstar will identify with the people in Northstar. I'm going to now switch to the self-directed online learning practice lessons. But before I do that, does anyone have any question about this instructor-led curriculum before I switch? Okay. If you do, feel free to go ahead.
Before you go on, I just wanted to say how amazing it is to have all of those resources already written out, and it takes any of that pressure off to develop it yourself, and that it's all written out. So I'm always just so impressed by that, how it's all right there, and then you can take and pick, maybe depending on your situation, what you want to highlight or not, but you don't have to start from scratch every single time, and it's all tied directly to the assessments.
Right, and I will say it took our team whose job it was to do this several years to create all of this material. So you're saving yourselves, like Andrea said, a lot of time and energy. Even if you know, every teacher likes to kind of embellish it the way they want to, but it gives you a great starting point. Right. Cindy said she's offering classes next month, but if she had to wait until she could write them, it would take a year because it's a intense work. Okay, so now let's talk about the self-directed online learning practice lessons. So many of your libraries, you don't have the capability to teach classes, you know, maybe you don't have staff, maybe you don't have room to teach classes, or, I mean, libraries serve a lot of patrons, and you might want to have something where patrons can kind of do it more on their own. The one thing you will want to remember, and we'll talk about this further in other trainings, is for those people who have really low digital literacy skills, they won't be able to do this on their own. They will need some guidance and some help getting oriented to it. I know that oftentimes libraries provide lots of great resources online, and Northstar can be one of those. And just know that if someone doesn't have digital literacy skills, they're not going to be able to go online to find it and use it. So different populations, you know, if someone just wanted to learn Excel, they probably do know how to get online and they can do that. Some of the other people won't be able to. So we currently have 11 of the 15 unit topics completed. Information literacy is next, and that should come out this month. And then after that, it will be your digital footprint. You can see that there are 4 that are available in Spanish right now. So as we create an assessment, or as we translate an assessment into Spanish, we also translate the practice lesson into Spanish. The reason there's 4 here is because we have not completed yet the telehealth online learning module. That was the 5th one in Spanish assessment. So I want to show you what these look like, because it's easier for you to understand. So we are going to take a look. You should see a picture of a laptop on your screen. There'll be words above it. Hopefully you'll be able to hear the person talking. Sometimes, depending on how your computer is configured, you won't. But nonetheless, she's reading the words that are on the screen already, and I just won't talk until she's done because it's hard for me to talk over her. So let's take a look at an example here. Okay.
If you look closely at the outside of a computer, you will see buttons and many small holes. These holes are usually called ports. Each port has a specific shape for different uses and different types of plugs.
So you heard that she read very slowly and clearly. You can speed up the audio, you can slow down the audio, you can turn off the audio, and then there's also closed captioning for any embedded videos we have. So hoping to reach a lot of different learning styles through Northstar. And as I said before, at Northstar, we really believe that you can't learn Northstar through instruction alone. You actually have to practice the skills. So I'm going to click on the next button to show you an example of that practice piece.
Here is a flash drive that you can plug into a computer. Click on the port that matches it.
So then if I click here, I'm told, yep, this is a USB port. If I had clicked on the headphone jack, it would say, no, this is a headphone jack. Try and find something that matches the shape of the flash drive. So the way the Northstar Online Learning is set up is you'll have the instructional piece, the practice piece, instructional piece, practice piece, etc., for several of the standards. And then there'll be a little quiz, 3-4 question quiz. And after you take it, it will say go on in the module or go back and review what you just saw. And there'll be about 3 or 4 of those sections. And then at the last section, it will say, after you take the quiz, it will say you're ready to retake the assessment or go back and review X, Y, and Z. So again, very tailored to each person's learning needs. If someone were to do the entire module from start to finish, it would take them about 90 minutes. But you don't have to do it all at once. So oftentimes people will do it on their work break, actually. So let's say they have 10 minutes to do it one day, and then 3 days later they come back. They will, their progress will have been saved, and they'll be able to see what they've done and what they still have left to do. So I want to show you what the learners themselves see. We call it a learner dashboard. And they can see what they have available to them and what they've accomplished. So because I'm on staff here, I have to go through a few extra things to get there, but this is what the learner dashboard looks like. And you can see if I scroll down that all 15 of the topics are here. As you know, we only have 11 of the 15 completed. So if you look at information literacy, for example, what clues do you see that how is it different from social media and career search skills? If you look at these 3 boxes, how is information literacy different? What do you see that would make you think that it doesn't have the self-directed online learning? Yes, it says instead of you can see in social media and career search skills in the bottom right-hand corner, they both say lessons. And here on information literacy, it only says details. The other clues are that it says here in the bold, lessons are not yet developed. And if I were to click on details, it would say there are no practice lessons. So we've tried to make it apparent to the learners which ones are not yet available to them. So now let's look at internet basics here in the middle. And you can see that what it's showing you here is this outer ring, this dark purple ring, is showing you how well I've done on the assessment. So if it was the full circle, I would have gotten 100%. So it's kind of graphically showing me how well I've done. And then the inner ring is showing me how much of the self-directed online learning practice lessons I've completed. So, here I've completed about half. If I go to lessons, it's smaller. I go to lessons and I click on the standards tab below the circles. This tells me if I've taken the assessment already, which standards I got wrong. And then over here on the far right, I can go and practice those specific standards if I want to. So again, if I just want to focus on what I got wrong and learn those skills, I can do that. I can always come back and practice them as many times as I want, and I can practice the skills that I have already passed too if I want to. If I went to the practice tab, these letters that are in uppercase and bold, these are those sections I was telling you about, where you have a section with a little quiz. So in Internet Basics, there's 3 sections: connecting to the internet, using the internet, and staying safe online. And then you see these bullet points, and these bullet points really are the standards. So if let's say I'm a learner and I had passed this, and 6 months later, I want to apply for a job online, but I kind of forgot how to fill out an online form. I could come back here and just click on fill out an online form and review that section. Or let's say I'm an instructor teaching a class and someone missed a day. I can tell them, well, we covered these standards in class, so you might want to go over them on your own with the practice lessons. Or you might, if you're an instructor, say, well, last week we looked at top level domains. Let's spend 5 minutes, everyone just going over the practice lessons on top level domains. So you can use the instructional materials either separately, just the instructor-led material, or just the practice lessons. You can use them both, and you can use them tie them together because they're all based on the same standards. Okay. then you also, as instructors, can see what the learners are doing and what they, how much of the practice lessons they've done. So instructors would see this. So here I am the learner here in this situation. Under the word module, these are the different topics. And if you hover over the icon, you can see what it stands for. Best score tells you just that, the best score someone's gotten on an assessment and how many times they've tried to take it. And then it's color coded. So if it's in green, that means they passed. If it's in yellow, they haven't. The practice lessons, this shows you how what percentage of the practice lessons they've completed. Badge tells you if they've received a badge and whether it was in a proctored environment or not. Here's where you can print out the certificate. If you look at the far left at the eye with the circle around it, in Northstar, that means there's always information behind that button. So if you click on it, here you can see what standards this person missed. And then if they've done the practice over here on the far right or not in the practice lessons. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, this will tell you, if they've any assessments they've taken, if it was proctored, what their score was, etc. But if you click again on this eye and you scroll all the way to the bottom, let's say you're working with someone or you have a digital navigator who's working with someone and they just are having a hard time passing the assessment and you're not really sure why. You can come here and see the actual questions they're missing to see if there's a pattern in something they're not understanding. And of course, I don't expect you're going to remember what question 22 on Internet Basics is. So if you click on the red square, it will bring up that actual question. And you can see that maybe they aren't understanding one of the words in here, or maybe it's asking for 3 answers and they're only giving 1 or something like that. I would never say to teach to the test, but this might just give you some insight as to what's tripping this person up. The other nice thing about Northstar is that it will track the time that people spend on the practice lessons. And if it's important to you to know, you can even segregate it out where it's tracking the time they're spending with you in a class or in a tutoring session versus when they're doing it on their own. And so sometimes that's to various different types of organizations that might be important for funding. It might be just interesting for you to know. Or you may not use it. Any questions about the self-directed online learning and the practice lessons? Okay. So in order to access the practice lessons, you do have to have the learners signed up into the Northstar Learner Management System. And in order to sign up, the only information that's needed is a first name, a last name, and an email address. Now, of course, many of the people who have low or no digital literacy skills don't have email or don't know how to use email. And that's okay. You can create an email address for them. They don't ever actually even have to look at that email. It's just a way for them to sign into the system. That is something that you can have library staff do, sign people up. And you can also have people self-sign up if they have the skills required to do that. So if you want to make it available for patrons to sign up on your web page, they can. And again, they would just add their first name, last name, email address, and create a password. So just remembering that there will be some people who don't have the skills yet to do that. I will need some help. You can use fake email addresses as long as I think it would have to be terryfake@gmail.com in order for it to work. But yes, you can use a fake email address. In fact, I create them all the time for demo purposes. You can also add a bunch of learners in bulk. So let's say you are offering a class. We give you a spreadsheet, you fill out those 3 columns, and then you would upload it into the system, and all those learner accounts would be created at one time. And we also have this tagging feature, which is important and helpful because when you run reports in Northstar, the default is that you'll see all the learners that are using Northstar at your library. And sometimes this is what you want to see, especially for funding purposes or to show to show the state librarian's office what you're doing or how you're using Northstar, or for publicity reasons, great to have that information. But sometimes you want to look at a subset of the people you're working with. So maybe you are offering a class and you only want to look at, the instructor only wants to see the learners in their class. Or maybe you want to break it out by zip code of who's using Northstar or something like that. We give you the ability to tag the learner accounts with whatever tags make sense to your library in order to run those sub-reports. So Northstar doesn't create the tags for you. You choose what makes the most sense for your library. The only thing we don't let you do is, personally identifiable information. So no social security numbers, driver's license numbers, birth dates, something like that. But again, whatever might make sense for you at the library, you can create those tags and run those sub-reports. And the reports, to give you an idea of what they look like, here are some of these kind of bigger picture overall reports. And you can see in a second that if you look under the green box where it says filter results, it shows you how many learners are using it at your library, how many hours they've spent on the practice lessons, how many assessments you've given, how many have been passed, what your pass rate is. So it's kind of a useful dashboard there. And then if you go to summary report, this top graph, this circle graph, is showing you how many of each type of assessment have been given. And if you hover over the piece of the pie, it gives you the exact number. So at this organization, over 2,000 basic computer skills assessments have been given. And this can be helpful, again, just to show what you're doing and what the value that you're providing. And also it can be interesting if you are, seeing that a lot of patrons are interested in, I don't know, like Windows, and not that many in Mac OS. Maybe decide, hey, we should have a class on Windows. And Mac OS, maybe that's something that people work on more on their own in that self-directed online learning. If you look at the graph below, the bar graph, this is showing you what percentage of each assessment has been passed. How many people have passed it. So if you look at, let's say email, healthy number are passing, 68%. Whereas PowerPoint, you only have 31% passing. So you might say, well, it seems like for the population we work with, email is an easier topic to understand. So maybe if someone doesn't pass it, we start them off with the self-directed online learning, the practice lessons. Whereas PowerPoint seems more difficult for the population that we work with. So perhaps we would want to have a class or a tutor if someone is interested in PowerPoint. So it can kind of help you decide where you want to spend your instructional time and energy. If we look at the detailed reports, you'll get some of that same information. But if we click on View Report, here to your question before of how long does this take, right above where it says question performance, it says average duration. And you can see here it says 15 minutes, 5 seconds. So it will tell you exactly how much time the patrons that you're working with are taking on each assessment. So that's very useful for time management. Let's say if you're going to do proctoring, you want to know how much time you're going to need those proctors for. If you scroll down, this will show you how well the learners at your organization are doing on each question in the assessment. So you can see that question 13, a lot of people are missing and at this organization. And that's also identified here by the brown triangle. So if you look over, you see that, well, question 13 is about hyperlinks. And if I click on the words, it brings up the actual question. So I can see that people are getting confused about which mouse pointer does what. So maybe I make a point of emphasizing that if I'm teaching a class or if I'm going over that with someone, or maybe I even have something up in the library, a poster or something that shows that, so that, again, not teaching to the test, but making sure that people understand what these different pointers do. Any questions about the reports? There are other reports, a lot of other individual reports that we'll look at later on in other trainings too. So the way Northstar is kind of set up is each of your libraries will have 2 to 3 Northstar administrators. And you want to make sure you have at least 2 in case someone takes another job or gets sick or something. That person's main role, or those people's main role, is to add and delete staff and volunteers in the Northstar admin portal. And they can also set some organization-wide parameters for Northstar. The other, so there's really 4 categories of Northstar users. There are the Northstar administrators, and then there are staff. So any of you that want to access the Northstar curriculum or the reports or add learners into the system, you would all be considered staff. And if you don't have access to Northstar yet, you would want to talk to your Northstar administrator. And if you don't know who that person is, I'm guessing Andrea can help you out there. I would highly recommend, if you don't have access to the Northstar admin portal yet, to try and get that, if possible, today before tomorrow's training. It will just make it more relevant to you. The third category of Northstar users are proctors. So these are people, they have the same access as staff, and they've gone through the 15-20 minute video training on how to do proctoring. And once they've done that and they pass a little quiz, they get a special code that lets them do proctoring. And then the fourth category are the learners. You can have as many staff and proctors really as you want in the system. And then with the statewide network, you can also serve as many learners really as you want. We also, Northstar offers free advertising on our homepage, so that if, let's say, someone comes to the Northstar homepage looking for computer lessons, they have someone help them. They can either put in their zip code or have someone help them put in their zip code, and all the organizations that offer Northstar near them will show up on a map. And you can put in there what you offer, down to the level of classes and what times and days they are, whatever you want, and you can change that as things change. So you can definitely feel free to use that. And then we also have an online help desk. In case something's not working, you can contact us. We do have a lot of resources, which I'll tell you about tomorrow. But if you have a question about how to do something in Northstar, you can contact us. Or if you have an idea of how Northstar could be better, we'd love to hear those. We are a small team, probably maybe 5 full-time equivalent employees. But we honestly do have a spreadsheet of all the requests that we get. And the more times we hear it, the higher up the list it goes. And once it gets to the top, we find the money and the time to do it. So translation would be an example of that. I think that is about all. Sorry, this is for something else. That's about all I wanted to say. Any questions you have at the end of this? We're kind of at the end of our time, but I'm happy to stay. So any questions you have, I'm happy to answer them. And I want to say tomorrow's training will be focused more on how to do the tasks in Northstar. So how do you do proctoring? How do you add learners? How do you, looking at some more of the reports, how do you find the resources so that you know how to do things? And then Thursday's training, which is my favorite, actually focuses on how do you talk to your learners about Northstar. So about using the assessments, how do you guide them through that if they need help? How do you guide them through the practice lessons if they need help? And then, like I said, I'll pretend that you are all learners and I'm the instructor, and we'll go through some of that instructor-led curriculum so you can see what that experience is like. All right. I don't see any questions. So otherwise, then I will see you all hopefully tomorrow. And Andrea, I don't know if you have any parting words.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone, and I will see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Well, you have a different link, but same time. But one comment I just wanted to make about contacting Northstar support. of course, by all means, contact them. But if you don't mind giving, either letting me know or sending me an email with your question or like letting me reach out, then I can also keep track of the things that keep coming in. More likely than not, I will have to reach out to Northstar anyway, but if I know, sometimes I do know the answer. And also if I know that the same question is being asked, then that lets me know that maybe this is something that needs to get shared out more widely, more proactively. So Northstar is so amazing with their customer support and the way that they get in touch with to answer questions. But I also want you to know that you have support through the state library and that we want to see you successful with Northstar as well. So anything, even advice you can give me on ways to help support you in utilizing Northstar and integrating digital literacy into your programs, just let me know. I'm happy to help. So thank you so much, Teresa. And we will see you all tomorrow. I'll be sending out the recording today and the link to tomorrow's registration form in case you didn't sign up and this convinced you, got to do it again, get more information.
All right. It was great to see all of you. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.